housekeeping stuff. Has anyone got access? Has anyone enrolled yet? I'm so sorry. This is so embarrassing. Like, yeah, are you actually sorted on your enrolment?
I sent my enrolment thing back, but I've had nothing since, so I don't know. I still have access to Moodle though, so I assume
that actually is a very good indication. Yeah. What about anyone else?
I think the problem was, for me, I could always get on Moodle. It was more I can't get onto the locate, so the Coventry Library.
No, that's so hard for assignments, isn't it?
Oh, I can't get onto the library either.
I've never been able to use the library, so I don't know if I can get on or not because it's just awful. But I can get on Teams.
Yeah, I sent another email to the Rhodes team just to say, look, I've sent my enrolment form back, but I've still not got access. And it was just kind of like, we're still sorting it.
They actually, the Rhodes Academy team, I have to say, will do everything in their power to do it. And they've actually called a meeting with registry to say, we cannot have this ever happen again. What can we do about it? So, you know, you could not be in better hands for the sake of someone actually fighting your cause. They're really good. It just feels, and you'll know this from your experience at work, it's so siloed and the processes just don't work. And so actually whatever we can do, and that's why if I can put things on Teams, if I can set up a OneDrive, because I got questioned on my timesheet as to why have you set up a OneDrive folder, and it's like, because everybody in that class has been unenrolled. And they were like, oh, okay. It's like, so we had to do something else to do it. So yeah. So in terms of, and then because I'm teaching next week, aren't I? I'm teaching next week, next Thursday. Yay. Like genuinely, that did sound a bit sarcastic, but it wasn't meant like that, because it is good. I've prepped it all, and then given my current situation, realised I've prepped September's course with you. So like, oh, sugar. Because I was like, oh, that's because it's already written and sorted. It's really quite straightforward as well. So, do you want a support sheet again? Where you fill in the blanks? Yeah, I'm gonna. So yeah, because I haven't taught it online before, so I'll do that because I think that's quite helpful to have. So I'm gonna get the support sheet. Now, do I put everything on Moodle, or do I put it on Moodle and on Teams? What's the best way to make sure everyone can access things? I don't know. So anyone not able to access Moodle?
I'm fine on Moodle.
Okay.
Me too. I'm good on Moodle.
Okay.
Moodle access is good now.
Okay, that's good. Right, that's absolutely fine, and I can always work out a way for those that can't access it. So I'll have everything ready. The sessions won't be particularly long. You know my style now, don't you? It's sort of, you know, we have a bit of lunch and then we're done. And actually, I think we might be done in 2 sessions as well. So we can do the third one, have one-to-ones, pre-bookable if you want. So yeah, but let me just figure it out and I'll be in touch with you all, okay? So it's, yeah, quite nice. It's about sort of projects, but it's almost like if you're a project manager, it's just embarrassing because it's not like APM project management. It's more sort of just the practical components of it. Okay, so portfolios. I remember going on a windy walk while you were on Teams, whilst Jo was talking to you about the portfolios, wasn't she? And endpoint assessments. So has Jo booked in 3-way reviews with you all? Or has she been in touch with you yet to start booking them in?
I've had one.
You've had one?
Yeah, I've had one with Jo, yeah.
Fantastic. How long ago was that?
Oh, hang on, I'm gonna have to go back in my calendar. All the days are blurring into one. Bear with me, I'll let you know.
It just feels sad, doesn't it?
Yeah. I had a 3-way review in January.
Okay, yeah. So you
and then obviously prior to that, that was like December 19. So I've had 2 altogether.
What, over a year? Was that one?
So we were due to have they're all booked in, and then she had to cancel ours for COVID. It wasn't Jo, it was the lady before.
Ah, Selma, probably, yeah.
I had one on the 14th of December. Sorry.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah.
So have you missed like a year's worth?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Not ideal, but it's not a massive problem. And you're due to complete, just have a look at your schedule. Oh, so is it like Feb next year?
That sounds about right.
roughly. Or sort of Feb next year we start the work-based project, don't we? So we've got projects next to achieve results. Then you've got change back with Joe. Then you come back to me with operational plans, finance with me, and then we've got a work-based project. And then work-based project starts in about Feb time, and think about sort of September time next year, you'll be doing your endpoint assessment. Okay. How are you doing in terms of, has anyone started to build a portfolio of evidence yet?
I must admit,
Okay.
I'm finding it quite a daunting,
Yeah.
because it's just like you do your assignments, you do the workshops, that's all fine, but like the evidence thing, I don't know, I just feel like it's really quite time consuming. And when you just get like wrapped up in your day job, and it's just not at the forefront of my mind, and I know it probably should be further forward.
No, I don't, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about it. So Jo came up with an idea that actually after every time we teach a module, we should do like a little short session just on portfolio building, just to bring it back to that. Because so you've got a sort of a long journey that you're going on with it, with the 8 modules. So you well, you know, through quite a few of those, ending with a work-based project. Underneath all that, what should be going along is these 3-way reviews, and the 3-way review should actually drive the portfolio. And what I mean by that is, in those 3-way reviews, the way they should work is they're obviously with yourself, but because you've got a line manager, or sometimes it's like, if we can't get a line manager, it's somebody who is aware of what you do. You start to bounce ideas off in terms of like, what evidence have we got for that module? How have you done that? Can you give me some examples of that? And what we're starting to do is not just book in a 3-way review, but afterwards it's worth having a little one-to-one with Jo about actually what portfolio evidence have I got and how can I map it. So actually, Amelia, it shouldn't be anything extra. It should just be, all it is working out how to package up what you've already done. And in that case, it's not onerous, but it's just because you haven't started doing it yet. And because of that, do you know, you're not in that mindset, so it feels huge, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does a bit, yeah.
I think at the moment it feels like it's like a bit of a blur, don't really fully get it. And I feel like once we start doing it, it'll be a bit like when you do your first assignment, where actually it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, I do. And then you'll start to see you're getting lots of sort of ticks off the list, and you'll be like, oh, actually, this is really straightforward. But I'll tell you what, the whole of this is a little bit blurry in the sense of even your timesheet, when you're logging your 20% off the job, that includes anything really that's development. Now, if you're in a secondment, most of what you're doing is development, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? So it's not like business as usual. It's the things that you're doing above and beyond, like that are a bit extra, that you're initiating this, that you're doing that. You can include all that in your 20% log. And again, with your work-based, with the evidence, you don't know what you can include or don't include, do you? So it's that, I think that's the main challenge, rather than it being not having it. It's just not realizing what we can use.
I think for me, some of it is the way you're supposed to build on it. So I've started to try and form some of my evidence, but it's kind of, it reaches natural endpoints, if you know what I mean. Whereas Jo seemed to suggest that it will all build on each other, but it's packaging it together. So I'm doing like assurances and approvals, and I've learned a lot, and I've got various things up there, but that's going to kind of be by the wayside now for a couple of years, because we move on to the next stage in the project. And so even though I'll carry on doing things with that, it's not really new or special. It's just going to be BAU, and it's figuring out how to show I'm improving, I suppose.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And it's how we capture that. And also, this isn't about creating extra workload for you. It's not meant to be. That's why sort of, and I understand totally what you're saying, Amelia, in terms of like how, you know, what you're doing and how you're doing it. So a couple of things to check if you've got. Have you got, if I just share, just get my memory stick out. Have you got a list of the evidence that you're trying to capture? Have you ever been given that?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
And have you been given it as a Word document that you can log against, or how have you been given it?
It's a Word document, isn't it?
Yeah, with some pink boxes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've been CMI, not sort of feminist or anything. It's just their branding. So I'm going to open it up, and then we can talk through like how we're going to go about doing this. So it's just find it. Okay. For those of you who joined a bit later, thanks for your assignments. They were really good. And yeah, it's just nice to have another module done, isn't it? Right. Okay, so let me open up. Right. So something that's worth mentioning to you. Okay. So you go through your program. You've got your different modules, your own modules, and then everything is packaged together and it's given to CMI. So we've got a description of your work-based project, we've got your 8 assignments, you've got your spreadsheet, or however you're capturing your off-the-job training or your sort of development, if you like, and then we've got this portfolio. Now, when CMI are going through it, you've got an external like sort of person who just checks really that everything's okay, and before it goes to them, Elliot, who's like our boss, will check that everything's okay. So it goes through a number of quality checks to make sure everything's okay. CMI have got to check your evidence around I think it'll be say 2 hours maximum. So the reason I mention this is actually they're not going to go through it in masses of depth. What they're going to do is they're going to scan through it, they're going to look at certain things, and they're just going to check that they actually tally with what you've said. So it's almost like a sampling process. And the reason they're looking at your evidence is to make sure, well, basically it's to inform your conversation, a professional discussion about what you've done. So it's just using samples of your work so they can actually talk about, like, tell me more about when you did this project, or tell me more about managing this particular person, or a sort of a new process that you put in. So it's very much used as a basis for a discussion. And the reason I want to mention that is that it's an enabler rather than something that you've got to make sure is absolute, that you've really got to fret over. It's the basis for them having some evidence to have a chat with you about it. So here's this. Can you see this Word document?
Yeah.
Okay. So the endpoint assessment comes after. So you finish basically your work-based project module. It used to be you have to have your whole project done and then we put it in. But now what you have to do is when you get, you will have to create a 500-word summary of your work-based project and what you're planning to do in it, and just show that the business has approved it, like just have an email saying so-and-so's approved it. You can have finished your project and that would be great, but you don't have to. And then if you haven't, your endpoint assessment will be planned about 3 months later. So you've only got about 12 weeks to do your project. Just a word on that. If anyone has got a project that you can already think of that would be really good to use, because in some roles I appreciate projects don't come up very often, let me know, and let me know we can start working on it straight away. So don't worry about it having to fit right at the end of the program. If it does, that's brilliant. If it doesn't, please, just let's get this to work for you, not try to sort of fit it the other way around. The only thing with a project is it can't be business as usual. It has to be something where you're implementing a change, and ideally that you do some level of research, even if that's just looking at stats within the business, looking at systems or processes, but it needs to be informed by something and come up with a few options, and then you have like what you're actually going to do. And it's about 4,000 words, but it's a lot more just tailored to your particular situation. So in terms of just in terms of business projects, has anyone already got something? I know Claire Gibbons, I'm working with you on yours. Has anyone else got anything that they think might come up fairly soon?
Yeah, I have. I've got 2 new projects starting, which are all about sort of implementing a change. So they would be absolutely perfect, because if
Brilliant.
I wait,
Okay.
I might be sort of too far gone in the life cycle to use them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you can do a little bit of retrofitting. We just have to make sure the dates work with the end of the project, just to make sure that they sort of do look in the right sort of timescale. But yeah, we can have. Are you going to have other things coming up, do you think, or do you think that they would fit the best?
They're quite meaty, both of them. So
Okay.
that's going to be basically my role. So it would make sense if I could sort of start thinking about that sooner rather than later with
Okay.
those.
Then I think we should book in a conversation to start that process then. And
Okay.
yeah, anyone else, I would invite you to do the same. So if there is something that crops up, just drop me a line and we'll get we'll book a one-to-one, just have a conversation about it. So in terms of, so you've got this spreadsheet with the colour boxes, and what we're looking for, they're assessing three things. They're assessing your knowledge, your skills, and your behaviour. Now, your knowledge, all of that should be covered by the assessments. So if we look at this sort of thing here, on the left-hand side, we've got knowledge, all the criteria, see all the pink boxes, because ultimately, you know, that's what we can assess through your, so through the choice of modules that we've chosen for you, you're covered in terms of your knowledge. So that one's sorted. What we need to do as well is make sure that we've got, so it's the skills and behaviour that we're looking at with a portfolio. So if we just go down here, so for skills, right, sorry, going back to where I said they got about 2 hours, haven't they, to look at your portfolio. The reason I mention it is because they don't want to look at too many pieces either. So what we need to do is we want to find some really good pieces of evidence, and then we want to map them. So sort of basically tick off as many of the criteria as possible. So rather than approaching this by thinking, okay, so I've got A7, input to strategic planning, and you're like, right, I've got something that I've done for that, and then you can evidence that. Don't want you to do that. Instead, what I'd rather you do is think of a scenario that you've done at work, so something where you've implemented a new change, you've identified a process, there's a template that's, for example, a template that needs creating that means it could be used across your area, and you've introduced it and rolled it out to the stakeholders. So we've got a situation, we've got something you've done, and then you go through this and go, well, actually, that was an impact to strategic planning because as the basis of that, this changed. It also demonstrates that I created a plan in line with the organisation's objectives. So you sort of go through them and you think, oh, actually, this covers like 7 or 8 criteria potentially. So you sort of, think of the situation first. And this is where these 3-way reviews, we're asking for examples of what you've been doing at work. And then we're thinking, right, okay, so if you've done that, how do we capture it? And then how do we, which criteria do you think it maps to? Let's go back. Sort of appreciate this. Sort of feels like I'm going all over first. So some examples of things that you could use for evidence include. Let me just have a look. They're quite. It feels a bit random, some of them. So we've got. So evidence may be used to support, demonstrate more than one knowledge, skill, or behaviour. So really, we want absolutely as many as we want them to be as sort of meaty, if you like, as possible. So you can either use workplace documentation or records. So it might be that you've created a policy or procedure, or you've created some sort of flow chart or new process. Have any of you got examples of those that you could use?
Potentially.
Did you come up with a bingo card? Obviously, we won't talk about it too much. This has been recorded, but you know. Was that yours?
It was mine. Well,
wow.
My assistant project manager kind of brought it together, but I supported her for it.
Yeah.
But there's a few other things where we're potentially changing the change control process.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, and what we can do is, because you're sort of part way through now, you can almost think about what you've already got. And you know what? You can go back up to about 5 years. So it doesn't have to be since you started the apprenticeship. You know, so if you think about anything that you've done since you started the area that you're in, or what, you know, just think about, it can't sort of be, you know, something from the 1980s or something, but you've got to, you know, so it's got to be relatively current, but you can go back a bit on this. We're not just restricted to that. Has anyone else got any examples of any policies, procedures, anything that you've done that you've sort of headed up or initiated?
I think I've got a few. So I'm currently working on a really big change piece of introducing a new cost management process across the business I work in. So it's been a meaty project. It's 18 months in the go. And hopefully in the next month it's going to be deployed out and implemented into the business. So I think that will tick quite a few of the boxes because it has been project managed from kind of start to finish. So I think I'll be able to use that in quite a lot of the mapping.
Yeah, absolutely. Imagine getting down to like 5 or 6 pieces. That would be incredible, wouldn't it? That would be the dream. And has anyone else got anything? I bet you have. I bet there's things. Paul, can you think of anything that you got?
Well, yeah, it's difficult for us because our procedures are sort of set, but we did come up with as a team with, or certainly, well, me and another guy came up with basically sort of like a flow chart of how to deliver a scheme and what paperwork you need to fill in to deliver that scheme. Because before we had that, the documentation was there, but you didn't know what order to implement it in. It was so that I think that would suffice, I think. But
that would be brilliant. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that sounds like a really good one. So I just want to plant the seeds now. I know Joe's already done it, but I think the more times we sort of talk about it, the idea of the 3-way reviews is just a chance to pick up on this as well. So it'll work really well in the sense of, you're not going to go too long without sort of saying how you're doing on that, and then you'll have a few follow-up actions and hopefully create a couple of pieces. Other things you could do. So this sounds very American, but you can get a witness testimony, right, or a witness statement. So this is someone, but not you, writing about what you've done. So basically, I think this is going to be the easiest way to do it, because there will be scenarios where you've done something and they can there's no pro forma for it. So there isn't a particular format that they need to follow, but they talk through actually what your role was, how you did it, what you did. That could cover loads of them, couldn't it? If you talk about your particular involvement in a specific project. Was it you, Daniel, that did the public consultation? No,
that was I can't remember his name now. Guy works for BT. Henry, yeah.
Henry, wasn't it? Okay. Can any of you
I have done presentations for public consultation.
Have you?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. That was a lucky guess, wasn't it? Okay. So do you think somebody, because it doesn't have to be a direct manager, it could be a peer, but is there anyone that you're still involved in that could actually write about how you went about it and the sort of how it went and your role in it?
Take up too much of their time, I'm sure that.
Well, I'll just write it for them. One of those things where people, you say, can you give me a testimonial, and they go, yeah, you just write it and I'll approve it.
Yeah, I'm sure they could do that.
Yeah, because you'll have more idea of the sorts of things that you're looking to put in, because you can look at the evidence, can't you, as to what sort of things you could tick off on that. I think the witness testimonies are going to be, or witness statements are going to be absolutely the best way. They're going to be so straightforward for you to capture evidence. But you're right, the problem with it is, if you ask someone to do something like that, it's like, what are they meant to do? How do they go about it? And it's sort of this idea of how they're going to structure it. So I think if you think about somebody that was involved, think about a project that you were involved with somebody on, and then think about the key points that you want them to include. So you might even ask them almost like a series of questions. So it's almost like subheadings that they just comment on this or they comment on that. And then those subheadings could actually match to some of the knowledge, skills and behaviours. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, and I get the overall goal, but I still struggle to picture what this finally looks like in its final form. Like how big is
I haven't
this?
even got examples to show you.
How big is the evidence? How big is the final project have to be? Like, what is the scope of it?
And where do we store this? Like, we can obviously note down in that grid like examples, but where are we storing this? Because in my past apprenticeship, like, we had like an actual mapping platform where you'd upload the evidence and map it to something. Whereas like I'm just struggling to understand yeah, like you said, what it actually looks like.
Is there an apprentice platform? I mean, is that still going ahead, or has that been kind of stood down?
I believe it's still going ahead. I don't know.
I said when we joined the Rhodes Academy.
Oh, I don't know.
2019.
It's just right. I'm sort of the mindset now that actually we'll just sort stuff out, like what I'm doing with you. So when I marked your assignments, when I did your marking sheets, all of that, right? I put on our teams. Okay, so we've got an operations level 5 teams thing, which all the staff involved in are on it. And I put a spreadsheet as to everyone where you're at in terms of what you passed. I'm not looking after you for 3-way reviews. I'm looking after Rhodes, the 5th cohort. I've got all their 3-way reviews on there. And what I'm encouraging is all my colleagues. So it's not something that you can access, and I know that, but it sort of starts to build everything up that we can share with CMI. And we could include, you know, if you've got pieces of evidence, Amelia, but it's not ideal because really, you're absolutely right. We should be having something like apprentice. And we've gone through the procurement process. People have had training on it. I just don't know. I think sometimes COVID's a bit of an excuse, isn't it, for just not doing stuff? I don't know. Maybe that's just cynical.
For sure.
Do you think so? Because I do. I just think.
Yeah, just a lot of scenarios like outside of work as well. It's like, oh well, you know, COVID, and it's like, well, no, because you know, it could still happen. You're just choosing not to do it.
Yeah. Let me.
Because then I feel it can be like progressive. You know, kind of.
You log in
Yeah.
and you see what you've done. I mean,
Yeah.
how simple. You're asking me, and it just is. It feels horrendously embarrassing. Just in the it's the most obvious thing. Okay. Well, I'm seeing you next week anyway, aren't I? So I can raise this and find out where we're at with it. However, this can't be, you know, we still need to start getting cracking on this. Would it be helpful? I'll tell you what would be really helpful, I think, for you. I'm just imagining, but even if I were to create some pretend evidence, like some samples, you could just do some samples and stuff, couldn't you? Do you think? So you sort of get a picture of actually what. Yeah. Okay.
For me, it's about how we share that evidence. Like we can save it in our own folder, of course, but when it comes to CMI looking at it, like where are we supposed to be storing this?
Yeah, and actually, like they've said before, I think some of the cohorts are using sort of OneDrive to do it and sharing a link on that. But actually, there should be a standardised way of doing it. And the reason I'm putting everything on Teams now for everyone is we had a situation in September where most of my colleagues' contracts weren't renewed, so no one had a job. No one had any job. So bad, honestly. And like people haven't come back since. And then you've lost 3-way reviews, you've lost all this. And like that is never going to happen again, because if the organisation's messes up, that's one thing, but it's not fair on you, you know, as the. Yeah, so we're trying to put for 3-way reviews and things. We're putting even Joe's not as like I'm a bit sort of you know like a lot of organisation, and Joe's a little bit more relaxed on it than I am. But even Joe's bought into it. Even Joe's getting the spreadsheets out, so this is good news. But it protects you. That's why we're trying to do it. But it's your access to things, isn't it? And actually, if you're even uploading your own assignments, that's better than, you know, that you can take ownership then, can't you? So I've got a list. Find out apprentice, and then you want some samples of pretend evidence, don't you? Like sample evidence examples. So witness statement. I think we almost want to be at the point where you've got a pro forma that you give someone, don't you? That you sort of say that you adapt it and say, could you complete that for me about the project? And then it just takes them 10 minutes, or they even talk to you and you write it in for them and they just check it. That would be, do you reckon that would work? That sort of.
Maybe that could tie into a PDR, because that's what you. Obviously, a PDR is maybe general, but you go through what have been your successes, what have been your challenges, what has your role involved. So maybe you could just kind of integrate it into the next PDR.
Yeah. Do any of you, could any of you also include any performance reviews that you've done with any of your, like, do any of your line manage and do? Are you sort of in the process of starting the performance reviews now?
My line managers agreed to write up what we talk about in to make a kind of witness statement aspect for that.
Okay.
I think it's just matching it to the different things, really, I suppose. And
Yeah, and we can help you with it. Yeah, we can help you with that as well, to sort of work out what it looks like. It's just a case of you almost need to bring stuff to the party, and then we can think, okay, we can do that. But yeah, PDRs would be very good. And actually, they match in very nicely with one of the key parts of the interview is how are you going to be developed. So if you can include all your PDRs in there, that would be fantastic. I think the witness statements are a little bit different in the sense of they're looking at more specific skills. And it's more around a scenario. So yeah, include your PDRs. You've done with Joe. Did you do some time ago a performance development plan, like as part? Was it 525?
Yeah.
Have you got? What do you keep up to date? Is it more the PDR, or is it like? Is that a lot more comprehensive? Do you think that would be better to use that than update the that template? Which do you think would be easier for you to do?
I've been utilising both purely because my development plan was created in line with my PDR.
Okay.
So I've been utilising both and been trying to update my development plan throughout the year, as opposed to just having the two kind of PDR sessions in the year to just kind of track where I've developed.
That will be a key piece of evidence. So that sounds absolutely fantastic. So if you can do either or both. So yeah, use all they want to do is they want to be able to see something which is talking about where your future what's in line for you that they can talk about, because they're just, the whole thing of being on this program is at the start of an ongoing journey of your development rather than being the answer. Okay. So we've got witness statements. If I come up with some examples of those and some things that you could adapt. Now, the next thing we can use, and I don't know if any of you can think of examples of this, is annotated photographs. Can you think of that? How you do that? I mean, this sounds to me like a comic book or something. Sort of like, where you're flicking through it, you can see your sort of, what would it be?
Would that be maybe mentoring if you were physically showing someone how to, I'm thinking on site, how to do something, maybe?
Yeah.
Like, maybe a photo of you in action.
I think they are meant to be like action shots. I do wonder if it's because then, right, the next one is a video clip where you must be in view. Like for a maximum of 20 minutes. So it's almost like, you doing something or that you, but the video clip I get, because actually one easy win on this, if we're going back to this criteria, is, here we go. So if we're looking about communications or leading people, so we've got skills on leading people, communicate the organised visions and goals, development of coaching and mentoring and the management of change. Do you know what you could do there? You could record a team meeting if you're doing part of it. And actually that could tick off quite a lot of that. And you could say, look, for 20 minutes, so it's got to be a maximum of 20 minutes, and just sort of say, look, to capture some evidence, can you just make sure, if you're happy, if I run this slot in our next team meeting, and you know what, you could identify a few of these and have it recorded, and then you've got that evidence. Support the management of change within the organisation. You could be leading something where you're rolling out some sort of change, even a small change.
I think that's going to be interesting, trying to get a video of you doing something. It might be a recorded Teams at the moment.
Yeah, sorry, that's exactly what I meant. Yeah, that is that basically doing what you're doing, what I'm doing now, and asking them for their permission. Can you do that? And actually, as I say, everything about this is showing it's not the detail. They're not interested in, like, the confidential information about something to something. That's not the point. This is about you overseeing and having responsibility for a process, for a change, for the development of someone. And there's things here that we need to, this is why it's worth actually, maybe before you do, if you've got a 3-way review, or even after this, does anyone need this sending to them again, or do you need it putting on Moodle or anything?
Could we have a copy of that version you've got? Because I think the version we got from Joe is spanning off the edge of a page.
It's the same version, but whenever I see anything from Joe, I like get a bit sort of, oh my gosh, you know, we've got to format this properly. So yes, absolutely.
I think you've just got to view it in the correct manner, and then it works, doesn't it? I can't remember which.
I do think it spans off the page a bit, because I did, as soon as I saw it, I was like, blimey, that's that's a big width of a page. I've also got something else that I'm going to share with you. So I'm going to add that onto Moodle afterwards, and what I'll do is I'll set up a little thing that's called it will be sort of, I think you have an introduction documents, like basic support documents. In that, I'm going to add in a portfolio, and I'm going to put some documents in there. So I'm going to put this one in. I'm also going to put in, I've got a portfolio mapping document. Let me just share this with you as well. Sorry. So desktop. Here we go. Oh, I'm going to say, so we've got on this gives you just a high level as to which is much easier to read than the sort of version in Word. So we've got it's from page 28 onwards. You've got the knowledge, skills and behaviours. So you've just got, so this is the discussion which our portfolio needs to evidence. You've just got them listed like that. I just find that a bit sort of more manageable than on the side of this massive spreadsheet. Knowledge, skills and behaviours. In your three-way reviews, we'll always ask about these behaviours. So we're always looking for evidence on that as we're going through. So I'm going to add that to that folder as well. I'm going to add that Word document. Would you like to see a little bit of an overview of what the work-based project includes? Because I've got a visual that I can show you on that if you'd be interested.
Yes,
yeah, I think that would be quite nice, because it just gives you a bit of peace of mind. Okay. So with the work-based project, you're starting off with a proposal. So that's that red thing with a light bulb at the top. Okay. 500 words, that's all it is, it's not marked. So this is what we have to have when we go to the endpoint assessments. And this is where you're just looking at those knowledge, skills and behaviours that we've just looked at and saying which ones you're going to be doing in this assessment. And you need some evidence that your managers have agreed to it. And then the project itself, you've got a series of set things that you've got to do. So we have to have an executive summary that you do at the end. That's just an overview of each section. You have to do all these bullet points. So it's really well broken down. And as you won't be surprised about this, but I've already got a template for it. So literally just I do love them. Well, I'm really on the spectrum, I've realised recently. So yeah, so I like things where you fill them in boxes, because it just makes life easy, doesn't it? So we sorry, the support these templates are all aligned to everything that we mark. So it just makes sure you don't miss anything without realising it. So you've got an overview of why you've come up with the idea, what the aim of the project is, you know, if it's just your area, if it's just your region, and then a couple of objectives that you're hoping to achieve from it and what you'd expect as the outcome. And then you need to put in a Gantt chart, and you need to identify, like, key factors might be if you're still working from home, if there's sort of budgetary constraints, if there's, I don't know, the governance is a key one connected with the work that you do. You need to do a RAG status, so the risks, RA3, so RA3, they're all things that we've done, you know, partly in the last module. We need to do a budget of it of some sort, even if it's just time, so versus the time out versus this time expectation to save. But it might just be a cost project, it might be something to improve things, in which case there's no saving, but we're having to do it. You need to do some sort of research, as I mentioned, but the research can be just looking at listening to things that have already happened. You've been part of meetings, so it doesn't have to be formal research, but you need something where you've actually got something to analyse and come up with some insights. Then we have to do an ethical approval process, because you're part of it's a university course. The way that you're collecting your research We just have to make sure that it's done in a way that doesn't put you in any risk or any danger. Yours is going to be absolutely fine, but it's just like if you're going to do a questionnaire or anything like that, we just need to check through it first and just upload it. And things have to be anonymised so that basically so no one's at any risk if they say anything contentious of potentially losing their job. It doesn't look bad, you know, it's just basically to protect all parties. The ethics like website that you'll have to go through to do that is a bit of a pain. So you'll log on at the same time as me and we'll just do it together. And honestly, I'll get you through part. So if you've done part of your project first, we'll get to that point, we'll log on it together and we'll just put the bits in the right place. I'll do it at the same time, just sign it off and approve it. So don't worry about that. It won't be onerous because it will, I'll sort you, help you in doing it. Then you go on, do your research. So, you know, whatever it is, if you're going to do it or access the information if it's internal. And then you go about how you're actually going to roll out whatever you've chosen to do. So in Paul's example, when you mentioned earlier about something where you were doing the flow charts and the sort of how things link, it could be that, you know, something like that, where you're just looking at this is the way we could do it. These are the different options. And then this is how we actually did it. And you're considering, you know, what else was considered and why it might have been discounted. Come up with some recommendations at the end of it, and then what you do differently if you, because there will be things that come up that you haven't planned for. So, you know, in hindsight, what would you have done differently? Roughly it'll be 4,000 words, and you'll need to deliver a 20-minute presentation on it. And then they'll ask you up to around 8 questions about it. So that's your final module. How do you feel about that?
I think my upcoming projects are perfect for this. So I'll pop in some time, Hannah, with you if that's okay.
Yeah, fantastic. That sounds great. Yeah. I mean, this is what you're doing. Do you know what? So with the people that are going through this at the moment, the first cohorts, what I'm doing with them is they've tended to so sometimes you might have a project, but it doesn't follow this format. So all I do is go through and double check and just say, look, you need to add this bit in. Sometimes it feels like reverse engineering it, and some of it you feel like you're actually sort of almost artificially making it a bit harder work than it is. Some projects it's almost like you have to simplify them a bit. Other ones you have to almost overcomplicate them slightly to come up with different options, because it might well be you start a project and you know what it's going to be, the outcome's going to be, but we have to go through this process where we're exploring different options. Is anyone concerned about, I mean, I think this should just be what you know, it just sort of it's just adding in a few more stages of what you'd be doing anyway. But does anyone think they're going to struggle with this?
I think it's going to be then making sure it's not business as usual for me, because this isn't entirely my job.
But do you work on a series of different projects?
I mean, the project I'm on is about 4 or 5 years in, okay, and we're just about to hit the transition stage. So in some ways that would be perfect.
Yeah.
For it, but it just feels a little unwieldy. And you say it can't be business as usual. This is my business as usual.
Yeah. So if you're in something where your business as usual is executing a project or doing something, it needs a start point and an end point. And you need to have some responsibility for it. And what it can be, if you are on a massive program of work, it probably just needs to be a small subsection of it, with which actually that you are heading up or you are responsible for.
Yeah.
So that's the way to do it. You need to sort of, as I say, for some things it's almost so simple you've got to make it a bit more complicated. For things like that, it's almost like you need to slim it down a bit.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, people have done in the past like lessons learned. So there's one that's done, they did a similar, so one of them did focus groups, capturing lessons learned from a certain way of sort of how they procure certain things. And then the other one has done like strategic recommendations. So, but the person who did the focus groups is actually painfully shy and hates focus, doing the things like that. So they did it to develop themselves. And then the person doing the strategic recommendations, she's quite outgoing and doesn't really like that strategic perspective. So she's done that to stretch herself as well. So they sort of followed on from each other, but they were quite defined in terms of what they've done. someone else, so a traffic officer, has done. They've been asked to look after a part of a road, something that's not actually normally under their remit. So they had to do a risk assessment around taking on this additional work. Had to talk to different people who are involved in it to look at what the other dangers might be. His project was absolutely massive because it was genuinely what he'd done. So it was, I think, around 40 pages or something, but it included all the recommendations, everything. Another example are communications to state, basically a champions network, and how they're putting together a communications plan and engagement plan. So these are all sorts of examples of people who work with you. Training, so actually customer contact centre and how they developed. There was one where they self-report, the suppliers, they self-rate themselves on certain things, but they just don't flag up any issues because they don't do it properly, and they constantly say they should have exemptions so they don't have to do it. And so this was around making sure that people buy into the process and actually don't keep asking for exemptions. So what you've got to do is just work out something where there's a bit of a problem about it, or something where there's a need. So if I sow the seed now, just have a think on that. And actually, that should really help you get your 20% off the job, because your project's doing that. So if that is naturally part of your work, it's easy, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is anyone at this early stage thinking they're gonna have a massive problem coming up with a project? If you do have any concerns, speak to me sooner rather than later, because I absolutely promise you we'll come up with something that is naturally what you do, but I'll be able to, I can look at it at the lens of like, what's it my after. Okay. I did this sort of presentation yesterday about, but you've seen this before, haven't you, in terms of like what the endpoint assessment's leading to? And have you, with Jo, because this is sort of adapted from hers?
I think very, very early on.
Yeah. Okay. Almost you see it at the wrong time, don't you? Because you're just sort of not aware of what you don't know, and it's just all a bit overwhelming. Is that right? It's sort of where you
Yeah.
Okay, so on this, what you're doing at the moment. So yeah, I keep mentioning this. It's abbreviated as KSB. So if you see KSB, it's the knowledge, skills, and behaviour. So knowledge we know we can relax on because that's sorted with the assignment. The skills are how you put it into practice. And this is where we need to identify potentially if there are going to be some gaps in terms of you not normally having the opportunity to do certain things, in which case we need to create them for you. And we need to identify that in the three-way reviews. So a skill that you may not have access to in your normal work role is going to be around, let's just have a look, the managing and leading of people if you're not a line manager. So has anyone not got any line manager responsibilities?
I don't.
You don't?
Okay. I don't either.
Yeah, okay. Is there any way that you could sort of like mentor somebody?
I task manage and I manage suppliers. I think I'm able to get.
But I suppose, are you going to be able to show that you are able to manage talent and performance? You are, aren't you?
I've been developing the person I task manage.
Okay.
So I think I'll be able to do that.
Developing, building, motivating teams by identifying. I think if you are not in a line manager role and you aren't managing a supplier, you need to work out a way how we're going to do that. And what I would suggest is, if it's something that's out your remit, you need to raise it with your line manager. Maybe look, if someone's coming in the organisation, if you've got younger apprentices, if you could look to mentor them, or if you could look, you don't have to do lots of it, but you just got to contribute towards this. So sort of, you haven't got direct responsibility, but you are for 6 months maybe working with them to help. You know, what I'm trying to do, you could artificially creating a role for yourself, but it hits that criteria. Do you think that would be, for those of you that don't line manage, do you think that would even be a possibility that you could do that?
Yeah, I think I've got the opportunity. We've got an apprentice coming into the team, and it has kind of fallen. I say fallen to me. It's been given to me as, go on, you can mentor her, coach her through the business. So I think that'll be a perfect kind of, because I was worrying about this one, but I think that kind of slots quite nicely into it.
I do, and I think if you're aware at this stage that you're not going to hit that naturally, as I say, if you're sort of flagging up and saying, can I do some mentoring, can I create something that I do this, you don't have to directly have responsibility to influence or motivate. So you can, but yeah, I think thinking ahead on these things, none of them should be an issue, but it's just about how, I mean, say for example, ability to chair and present at meetings using a range of media. You just have to put yourself forward for that, even if you're doing a small slot in the team meeting, or if you're saying, can I actually take over chairing this one? These things won't naturally come to you. Some of them might involve a conversation, and some of them, if you want to give us a heads up and say, look, I'm going to have a problem with this, will you help me in the three-way review? Will you support me in terms of like coming up with some ideas? And we can, do you know what I mean? It can come from us, not from you, if that's going to be, do you know what I mean? If it's a sort of difficult conversation to have because you're getting a bit of a roadblock.
Yeah. Sorry.
Please.
Can they come out from non-work related things? So on that chairing meetings and stuff, obviously there's a nice developmental thing, and I can do it in work very easily as well, but I'm about to become chair of a society I'm on, and so I'll be chairing meetings and stuff like that. That wouldn't count.
Unfortunately, it's got to be work-based.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so because the nature of the qualification is work-based, it needs to be relevant to your work-based situation. Okay. Not necessarily to your role, but to the work environment.
That's right.
Yeah, another thing we can do for evidence is we can record a professional discussion. And by that sounds very formal, but it's basically, we can almost do like a little interview with you. So if we've got, so again, you can identify a project that you've worked on, or you can talk about maybe managing a difficult stakeholder. I think, Paul, I'd like to interview you about that celebrity's heart attack. You know, that'd be good. Potential heart attack. I think some of the stories on the stakeholder stuff are brilliant. I think they'd raise a smile, wouldn't they? So we can, again, come up with a way of sort of capturing it by creating a series of questions and then just recording the conversation, recording it on Teams. So we have it sort of remotely like we would now, and we just save it, and we can then upload it on our imaginary system. We will have a system, but you know, we can upload, we'll have it somewhere that it's saved and it meets a number of your criteria. So we just need to structure it in advance. But what I'm trying to get at, because I think I just want to put your mind at rest that these things, they require a bit of thinking, but they shouldn't require a lot of doing. Does that make sense? Because actually, when we thought how we're going to do it, it's capturing it. It's capturing what you've already done. In some situations, you don't naturally do it, so we need to think a bit harder as to how can we build that experience in. But this whole course is about giving you a wide range of exposure that basically means if any roles come up, you hit everything. You've got some finance experience, you know, that you've done, even if you haven't had financial responsibility in the business, you've done a finance module that show that you understand about putting together budgets and monitoring things and understanding numbers. So it's sort of, if you've got the knowledge, even if you haven't got the experience. Do you know what I mean? So we're sort of trying to get you so you've got no gaps. So you are sort of able to be considered, not discounted. Does that make sense? But we need to, it's a really good excuse for you to get exposure to things that you don't normally get, you know, get in your role, and give you a bit more sort of, yeah, a reason to sort of get you somewhere else if you haven't necessarily going to get it internally. So it sort of can really work to your sort of personal brand as well, really, in terms of the organisation. So in terms of, have you got any more ideas now on what you could do portfolio wise? Has this sort of highlighted anything that you weren't considering initially that you think is possible? No. What other things could I do that would be helpful to you to try and sort of almost get you through? I mean, what do you think would be helpful for your next steps in terms of really trying to focus on this to build some ideas of portfolio?
I think maybe just seeing the document you had up then, which was the Word document with the skills kind of in it. I don't think I've actually got a copy of that, but looking at that was really good because I could kind of go, well, that ticks off that project, and I think maybe just it makes a lot more sense now, and I just need to kind of sit and go through and maybe just kind of put my mind to it a little bit more. And spend a bit of time on it.
I think it's digesting this, isn't it? And just giving it. Amelia, it's not the time in doing it. I keep coming back to you because I do understand what you were saying about it. Just feels like how they're blinking, you know, the assignments, as if the assignments aren't bad enough, you know, and then you've got to do this as well. But
I think it's just getting into a rhythm, isn't it? And once we start doing that, it will become a lot clearer and easier. But it's just sort of getting the ball moving, really, I think.
It is, and also you've had a year without the three-way reviews potentially, you know, with this sort of like everything down, because we were told we went into that we weren't allowed to teach you when COVID was, you know, it was an instruction that was given to us, so it wasn't us just saying, oh, actually no chance. So because of that, it just disrupted everything, didn't it? So and I think when we're picking up on the three-way reviews again, this will start to come into the fore, and it will just feel like a natural thing that you're doing, and almost gives you, you know, if you are with the sort of the time that you should be spending, gives you something else to look at in terms of how you're going to put it together. So yeah, I think it is just having that time, and even when we're doing the modules, like the next one that I'm doing, the so I've prepared the wrong. So I think it's the managing projects to achieve results. When we're going through it, if there's things that we're coming up, we need to start saying to you, oh, you could use that as a piece of evidence, or, you know, if you're talking about examples, we just need to have it in the back of our mind all the time, and then I think it isn't an issue then. So I'm going to include this on Moodle. I'm going to include that. So the PDF that I showed you, that's like the assessment plan. So it's got the knowledge, skills and behaviours at the end. It's quite long and it's pretty dull, as these documents tend to be, but it talks about like how you're actually being assessed. So it's sort of what the roles and responsibilities are, that sort of thing. It will be online. It will probably last, I think, about an hour and a half, if that. You'll do a 20-minute presentation. They'll ask 8 questions about that presentation. That's just all down here. And they'll look at your portfolio, and then they'll ask you questions around that. And then they'll ask you about your future developments. That's why you need to include either your development plan or your performance reviews. And from that, you get a pass, a merit or a distinction. So it's unlike, because, you know, in the assessments you either get a pass or refer. This is the bit where you could, if you really want to sort of excel, get your distinction. The only thing I'd say is, I don't think anyone knows, or anyone's particularly, you know, they don't understand. It's not like a degree where you get a first, a 2-1, you know, and it's got some currency. I think on this, it'd be more for the personal satisfaction. Have you been told about chartered status?
No.
Okay.
I can't remember.
Okay. So who here has a degree or a master's?
Yes, I do.
Okay, yeah. So if you've got that, you need 3 years management experience. And so that doesn't necessarily have to be of people, it can be of projects or things. It's just basically manage something, some resource of some sort of some kind. If you can evidence that, and you've got this qualification and you've got a degree or master's level qualification, that's then you are eligible for chartered status. And as you progress through your career as well, you potentially will get up to a fellowship if you wanted as well. So you can carry on with this if you know, you don't have to get further. It's just more about time and experience. If this is the highest qualification that you've got, you need to evidence that you've got 5 years experience, management experience. And if you haven't got 5 years at the end of the programme, doesn't matter at all. You just bank it till you have got 5 years and then you apply. So all of you should come out of this, whether it's immediately or slightly after, with a chartered manager status. which is really good. You know, that's probably worth more than the apprenticeship in some ways, isn't it?
And what sort of stuff do you need to put in your experience? Is it just kind of things that you've worked on in that period, or?
Yeah, so it'd be a bit like, it would be when I'm asked to sort of re-qualify, just send over my CV.
Okay, yeah.
So it's just sort of a headline really of the different job titles and things you've been responsible for. But I definitely think that's worth getting, because you've got the, if you want to use them, you've got the letters after your name then. Do you know, all this is about your personal brand, isn't it? It's just investing in that to give you options in the future.
Definitely. And I know our business is very much, you have to have a chartership to your name to get certain kind of status within the business. So it's definitely helpful.
Brilliant, because yeah, I do appreciate this is a lot, you know, there's a lot of work on this, but yeah, as I say, so sort of coming back to this slide that I think you were introduced to some time ago, what you get out of it, you've got the apprenticeship that you've been on, but I still think the language around apprenticeships isn't perceived in the way that they are now. I think there's a sort of an old-fashioned thing that you sort of, you know, just come out of school or something. So I think there's a little bit there of misunderstanding. But then the level 5 qualification in management, even if you've got a degree or master's in something else, I've taught people who've done this qualification, they've got a PhD, but it's in, say, engineering, or it's in some very specific thing, and they want some management qualification. And then this option for professional registration, that's your charteredship. So you've got your diploma level 5 plus being a chartered manager. And I think they're the big wins out of this. And then I've mentioned to you before, if you wanted to get a management degree, what you'd need to do. Not that anyone would want to carry on, but do you know, yeah, are you aware of what the next steps would be on that?
I'm not, no.
Okay, 1 year of evening classes, and it's 4 modules. You've got the equivalent of the first 2 years of a degree when you finish this. You can only do it if you want to do a management leadership degree, so you can't then go on to do like drama or something. So it's got to be aligned. But actually, we've cross-referenced the modules you're doing with the first 2 years of a degree, which means you'd go into the final year, and their evening classes, we do them online at the moment. So they're on a Tuesday and a Thursday night. You do 6 weeks at a time, 6 weeks, one topic, then you submit. 6 weeks, one topic, then you submit. And you do that for 1 year, okay? And so you've got 4 modules, and then you've got a BA honours in management leadership. So that's just sowing the seed on that. You don't necessarily, you know, if you've already got one, why would you want another? You know, you don't want to collect degrees. But if you have always had aspirations to get a degree, that could be something that you consider. Because that's not that much extra, is it really?
Definitely, I think that's a really good opportunity.
I know, and it's not sold, is it, to you?
No, I'd be interested in that.
Right, okay, yeah. So they deliver it at CU Coventry. And I used to teach, it used to be on Saturdays, and I used to teach on it. Oh my God, the people on it are amazing. They are like the brightest people that you can meet, but they tend to have left school fairly early or fairly young, so they haven't necessarily gone on and done academic things, but they are honestly so smart and so interesting, and generally really successful in their careers. But they're held back by the fact they haven't got a degree, so they sort of tend to have a bit of fire in their belly, because if you're doing this in your own time, and you know, on this one, I'm not sure it'd be supported by the business, so you'd have to have that conversation, because it's like a year of fees. But you know, how easy is that to get, in the sense of like not going to uni for 3 years full time, for what you've done, to just spend 1 more year, and then you've actually, you know, going to Coventry Cathedral and graduating.
That's fantastic. I think that's you've just described my life right there.
Okay. Oh, well, that's really good. Yeah, be in touch about that, because I'm quite passionate about that. It's a lovely process to see people go through. So it's different in the sense of you don't get pass or refer, you start getting percentages. Okay, if you are looking to get a degree, what you need to start doing is really start working on the references. So it is academic, you know, it has to be. You can use a bit of work-based experience, but it is slightly different. But I'll tell you what, they give you so much support in terms of like academic writing and things like that. There is so much available. So, and they probably do it more local to you if you're not local to Coventry. So if you are thinking of doing it, you know, there will be other sort of colleges or universities where you can just, all you're looking at doing is what is called is a top-up degree. Okay. So we know now, we've started to look again at, I think we've sort of refreshed a bit on the portfolio, maybe a little bit of fear in the sense of actually we've got a bit to do on this, but I think all it is needing some thinking space. We certainly should have some fear as an organisation in the sense of not having an apprentice or anything sorted out yet, and I will follow up on that and see what we can do as an interim. But as an interim, I know it sounds pathetic, but save your documents in a drive yourself somewhere, map them against that Word documents, put the file name in there and have something that's all ready so that when we have got a system, we can just transpose it over. Is that okay? I'll meanwhile look at sort of how we can do your professional, not professional discussion, the witness statement. A professional discussion example will probably be the sorts of questions on that might be useful as well for you to see how that would work, wouldn't it? Okay, professional discussion questions. Is there anything else at this stage that would be helpful for you to have hold of when you're thinking of it? I appreciate it's not very prescriptive. I appreciate it's a little bit sort of vague, but in some ways it has to be because it needs to fit all sorts of industries and roles, doesn't it? So it's what we need to do is sort of get in the right way of thinking to make it fit your particular situation that you've got at the moment. But really, the way we'll carry on. This is really picked up in your 3-way review, so that's the time to do it. Okay, I'll put this recording on. I'll just finish the save it. I'll put it on